Welcome to A Better Divorce podcast, where we have conversations about the emotional, financial, and legal issues that are on your mind or should be on your radar if your goal is to keep your divorce out of court. I'm collaborative divorce attorney and mediator Andrea Vacca, and I know that how you divorce matters to your long-term well-being. That's why it's my mission to help you have a better divorce with as little acrimony as possible, so that you can create the best life possible on the other side of your marriage. Hello, welcome to the latest episode of A Better Divorce podcast. I'm Andrea Vacca, the owner of the Vacca Family Law Group, and my guest today is Michelle Hirsch. Michelle is the Senior Vice President and third generation owner of Brunswick Companies, which is a family-owned property and casualty broker and insurance concierge serving clients and businesses throughout the United States. And so I'm really excited to have her here. Michelle, welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm excited to be here.
So, Michelle, I know in working with my clients that, insurance issues come up, of course, in the middle of a divorce, and there's a lot of concerns around insurance. And most clients, I find, are more focused on making sure that their health insurance will stay covered and their life insurance what's needed to stay in place. They're not always so focused on issues around their property, protecting their property, limiting their liability. But those are such important issues during the divorce and after the divorce. So I wanted to have you on the show today to kind of talk about that and bring some awareness to this issue and talk about what people need to think about. So what issues have you seen come up with your clients that before the divorce is final, they're still negotiating the agreement, life is starting to happen, things are starting to change? What comes up that you see and that you want people to know more about?
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing is that unless the duty is on the client, the duty is on you. So your insurance broker, your insurance carrier, they don't know if you've gone out and gotten a new apartment. They don't know if, you are giving a car to someone that's maybe a new party into the relationship. You have to disclose these things. There is no crystal ball. There is no mind reader. And what we tell clients that are, as they're going through a separation, is to really reach out to their broker or whoever they use. They go direct to a carrier at the start of a separation to really lay out the timeline and say, at this point, we're going to have somebody move out. At this point, we're going to change the assets. Because what people don't realize in the property and casualty world is that the insurance follows the title. The insurance follows the deed. The insurance follows the asset, who actually owns it. So during a time of a separation, until the divorce is final, that can be a little fuzzy, right? So we don't know who's necessarily living in or driving or wearing the jewelry or displaying the art, if it may not necessarily line up accordingly with who owns it or who has the title or who the lease's name is in or who actually, physically owns the asset. That's what the insurance company cares about, and that's what we have to disclose. And when there's confusion or it gets fuzzy, that's when you open yourself up to major gaps in coverage, because the insurance company, if they find out that the insurance is not correct based off of what is really happening in real life, then you're exposed to potentially not having coverage. Right. And that's what we don't want. We want to avoid that at all costs. So it really is a work in progress, and keeping those lines of communications open, because people think they have coverage. They think that they're protected until they're not. And then it all unravels from there.
So an example could be if somebody gets a new apartment and they've just moved out, but they've left it's agreed that they'll get certain artwork, but they're leaving it at the old home, but they're moving to the new home. So the new home, maybe they need renter's insurance, or maybe they think they're not liable for the old home that they left, but if title follows insurance, if the insurance follows the title, they're still liable for the home they own with their spouse, even though they're in the new apartment. That's
exactly
right.
Yes. It's a lot of ifs and a lot of whens. And yes, specifically when we see typically that's the first move, is someone moving out and getting this new apartment. And they think, okay, the building is requiring this insurance. I'll just, instead of getting things messy or calling my broker, or maybe a lot of people don't know about it, the separation in general. So you want to keep things under wraps. They just go online and they'll, get a quick renter's insurance policy. But what people don't realize is that they're still tied, most likely, unless they have zero ownership in that home, to everything that's part of the home that they just moved out from. So, actually, our advice most of the time, depending on the ownership structure, is to add that apartment to their current homeowner's policy as a secondary location. Because then the umbrella is additional liability that goes over their house, their cars, their boats, their toys, anything that they have. That umbrella would still extend to that apartment, even though if it's just in the lease, it's just in the name of one of the clients, it would still extend because the umbrella covers both. So, very few times, there are some occasions where we say, yes, go out and get your own apartment, to get your own renter's insurance to follow that. But until things are very clearly divided, until things are, very separate and the title and the deeds reflect that, you're still commingled. You still have that exposure, and you don't want to create additional exposure by creating all of these separate policies elsewhere when everything truly is still tied together. And with the art, the insurance, and same with the jewelry, the insurance company wants to know, where is the asset physically? And if that art is still being hung, or that jewelry is still kept in a safe in one location, but your name is no longer on that policy, then it gets really messy. So we really, that's why having those open lines of communication and asking the questions is so important to make sure that the coverage is there.
Yeah. So, sometimes I'm hearing you don't need more coverage. You might be sufficiently insured. So call the broker that you're working with, figure that out. Don't waste money. This isn't a time to spend more than you need to spend. Every dollar counts right now when you now have two homes that you're trying to pay for. So yeah, pick up the phone, call, find out.
Absolutely.
So when you have, I've had clients, especially here in New York. Usually there's only one car. Not a lot of times people have one car in the city. They don't need two. So they have one, and now the couple is divorcing or separating, but they still plan to co-own or co-use the car. Maybe it moves, like whoever has custody of the kids that weekend or that week will have use of the car, the first right to use the car. So we see parents sharing cars during the divorce process when they're no longer living together. And sometimes even after the divorce, we'll work that into the agreement. So what do parents need to be concerned about if they're sharing a car with someone they're not living with?
Sure. Well, again, the insurance follows the title. So we need to figure out who has the title to the car. And that's who the insurance policy's name should be in. Once the asset, so if it's owned jointly, and they continue to own it jointly, I wouldn't recommend that, just because, now we have separate assets. But let's say it's now in the wife's name, or, and let's call them person A. Person A's name has the car, and it's in person A's name. The insurance policy for person A is following person A. Person B can be listed as an additional driver on the policy. So they're covered, but it's not necessarily, they're not the owner, they're not the named insured, they're an additional insured. So they still have that coverage. Also, if it's something that's, you can use it when you need it versus regular use, the insurance companies allow what's called permissive use. So Andrea, I could give you my keys to my car and say, I give you permission to drive my car. The insurance follows the vehicle, not the person per se. So I think, again, it's a conversation. How often are you using the car? Right. The other question that comes in a lot with cars is the kids, teenage drivers. Right. So if the teenage driver, where are they living predominantly? Whose car are they driving predominantly? Who's that car titled to? that can help decide if the kid should be on person A or person B's policy. You don't necessarily always have to have kids on both parents' policies. If when you go through the logistics and see what car they're driving and where they're living and all of that doesn't necessarily align. Again, it's about saving money, but also making sure that everybody's protected. So you don't want to overinsure, but you also don't want to underinsure. And that's why having these conversations with a broker is so important. I know a lot of people often go online or do things directly with a carrier. And I would highly encourage people to not do that, because even if you do call and try to talk to a human, they're typically not a licensed agent. They're reading a script. You're never going to talk to the same person twice. So even if someone said you did have coverage one conversation, it gets really fuzzy. Whereas if you have that relationship, if you have a licensed, experienced broker that you can have that conversation with, you're going to be far more comprehensively covered and understand the full situation, as opposed to calling that 800 number.
If you have a broker, don't just pick up the phone. You're more likely you're going to get in touch with that person, be able to talk to them, really explain your situation, have follow-up calls, follow-up emails.
Absolutely. Right. And even though having the broker, we've had plenty of clients who have been divorced for over a year and never thought to call and tell us. And so here comes their renewal. We reach out and we're talking to them to see if there's any changes. And it's, oh yeah, all of this happened like 11 months ago and no one ever thought to tell us. So there's 11 months of incorrect coverage. So we're not mind readers. We're good. Yeah. We're not that good. So you really have to have those conversations.
Well, let's talk about the fun stuff that gets divided in divorce, and that's art and jewelry and other collections. Those are the things that bring beauty and love to people's lives and joy. So these items get divorced. These items get separated in the divorce. So what advice do you have for clients who will be leaving the marriage with, the majority of the jewelry, because maybe he or she, was the collector and got most of the stuff as gifts. What do people have to think about? Like, do they have to get new appraisals? Do they need new insurance policies? Like, let's talk about jewelry, art. Like, what comes up around this?
For sure. Well, we recommend, whether you're getting divorced or not, to have updated appraisals on all of your jewelry and art every 5 years. The market is just so continuously fluctuating that you want to make sure that you have really good appraisals, especially on your high valued items. As for with the separation, I think I mentioned this earlier, wherever the jewelry is being housed, worn, stored, kept is really important when it comes to insurance. Same with art. So it's very important for the broker to understand which location all of this stuff is. So let's say everything is with me in my home. I've gotten new appraisals. What's really important we see often is who is paying for the insurance. I've had several clients where the insurance was a gift from person A, but person B is now wearing and keeping the jewelry. But as part of the settlement, person A says, I'll still maintain the insurance because of the cost involved to insuring the jewelry. And this is not a good idea. Whoever has the actual pieces should be the one who's insuring it. Even if it's expensive, then make that part of the settlement in perpetuity to try to recover those costs. Having control of the policies is key, because you don't know when something is going to be not paid or when something might be removed without your awareness. You also want to be able to have the power of collections. So the more that you add, the more, that you're able to create this collection, perhaps get more discounts, understand what your full inventory of your collection is. So really taking ownership more than just I'm wearing these earrings or these rings. It's truly that piece on the wall is mine and I'm insuring it for this value. And whoever pays the premium, the insurance company doesn't actually care where the money comes from. As long as they're paid, then it's insured. And if there's a loss or a damage or theft, God forbid, there's going to be a check in the mail and then they can go and replace or not replace, but at least have the value and insure it correctly. But really understanding what you have and owning that insurance policy in your own name is so important.
And this has happened, a number of times with clients where they didn't realize they were so used to having their spouse take responsibility for the insurance and certain financial issues. It was just easier to think, okay, they'll just keep that covered and I'm fine. But
Right.
I've learned a lot from talking to you that I will strongly recommend, advise, insist even that not happen. They get their own policy. And if it's a cost issue, we'll negotiate it in the agreement.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other thing we see with art is sometimes, very often, the person who they've agreed on how to divide art, but the person who's left the marital home doesn't have the big enough space yet to exhibit the art and hang the art or whatever they're doing with the art. So they'll agree to leave it in the other home until such time as they are ready to take it, rather than having it put into storage. So in that case, if I'm hearing you correctly, even though it now there's art in an agreement, art exhibit number A now belongs to this person. If it's in B's home, the other person's home, they need to make sure that person has it insured. If the insurance policy has to be in their name, is that correct? Because it's in their home?
It depends on the carrier. Some carriers will allow you to say, here are my pieces. This is at this location. This is at that location. And some understand the whole intricacies of newly divorced situations. And if they are willing to say, for this year, we're willing to make an exception that it's at the old house, they're willing to work with you as long as they understand the whole process. The insurance, whoever, if they're not willing to, and they're saying, you have to either list the location or wherever it's listed is going to insure it, then legally they're going to write the check to whoever has the insurance policy. So that's something that lawyers can work, and I leave that to you to work behind the scenes. If person B owns the art, but person A is insuring it and there's a damage and person A gets the check, what legal right does person B have to said check? And I would say that should be legal ease wording verbiage that you can work out behind the scenes. But the insurance company, when it comes to art and jewelry, is not asking for any sort of who owned what's the title, where's the deed, whose credit card receipt. They're taking the word of whoever's policy it's on, that's who owns it and that's who's getting the check. Okay. So that's another thing to beware of when dividing and conquering, insuring, and making sure that if something were to have a loss, who's going to be the recipient of this settlement or the payout, I should say.
You were telling me when we were talking before, we started recording the podcast, that you were working with a couple who had a big jewelry collection only by pure dumb luck.
Yeah.
To find out that they weren't covered. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Maybe people might see themselves in this situation.
Absolutely. So it was a newly divorced couple, a husband and a wife, and the wife, not only did she have a beautiful jewelry collection, but she was also an Olympic medalist. And so her medal was worth significant value. And as part of the divorce settlement, clearly they had not talked to me prior to all of this. They had worked it out that the husband was going to insure all of the jewelry. So they come to us for a complimentary audit, because we will do that for anyone all day long. And we get both sets of policies. We get ex-wife and ex-husbands, and we're going through and we're doing the audit, and we're speaking with the wife and we're going through coverages, and we say, do you have any jewelry or art that you'd like to insure, because we're not seeing any on your policy? And she says, no, my ex-husband takes care of all of that. There should be, and starts naming all of these things, including her medal. Well, we, thank God, we're reviewing the husband's policies at the same time, and there's no jewelry of hers and there's no medal. And so when we understood what was going on, we were referred to this client from their financial advisor. We went to the financial advisor because we figured that would be the neutral resource here and didn't want to throw either under the bus. And the advisor went back to the husband and said, was this or was this not part of your agreement? And he just forgot and just thought that he had that on there and was no longer worried about those items. And when adding items for his new friend, he just took everything off. Well, and never told ex-wife. So ex-wife is completely bare on everything and there's no coverage. And it was like that for many, many years. So needless to say, she was not happy. And he was kind of like, oh, sorry. And, if not, had we gone through this audit process, they probably would still be today a lot of jewelry and her metal completely naked and just totally uninsured. So,
wow. So, my lawyer brain starts thinking, okay, so what are we going to do now? Right? We're going to have to cover all this. What is the cost involved in that? She definitely at that point should probably be, thank goodness she had this financial advisor encourage her to sit down with you and you happen to see these policies. But now go to your lawyer and say, look, this was in our agreement and you can't fix what happened in the past. No, thankfully, she didn't have any losses.
Correct.
She's going to pay for all this coverage now. This is going to be expensive.
Right.
Coverage for these pieces. And so you need to talk to your lawyer then and make sure you have a new agreement on how to get compensation going forward. Right.
And that's why I say, like, just from the get-go, split the assets and insure it for yourself and have that be part of the compensation and the settlement upfront. It's just not worth it. There's certain things that you just want to split and move on and go from there. Otherwise, you aren't in control, and that's not going to be okay, especially when there's a loss or if there's a claim and they're dealing with, in that case, what if she had lost something? The adjuster would be dealing with the ex-husband, not the actual. I mean, it's too many cooks in the kitchen, too many errors, too many gaps, too many potential. It's not worth it.
Right. Yeah. After a divorce, it's hard to think about all the new things you have to be responsible for. But it's not just being responsible, it's taking control and protecting yourself. And it's a really easy lift once you do it. You get the insurance in place, you just pay the premium and you're done. And you know that you're covered. So on our checklist that we send out to clients, we ask, after the divorce, like make sure you follow up on the insurance. And if you are leaving pieces of art behind and it is right for the your former spouse to be covering it, make sure you're getting proof that it's covered. You're getting access to see that the coverage is in place, because sometimes it does make sense, as you said, to leave it with the other.
Right. We had another situation where post-divorce, they had cleanly split everything, but they had some rental properties that they co-owned. And that was fine because it was an LLC. They were both members of the LLC. They had separate policies and they were both members of that LLC. And, you can own things jointly after the fact as long as it's set up correctly, or things were in trusts for the kids that had both of their names on it. So it's just making sure that you understand the full landscape of the ownership and the structure so that it can then be added on as an additional named insured and or, LLC, any sort of trust, whatever it is, just has to be listed. If it's not listed, there's no coverage.
Right. So, all right. So it's really the first step is just talk to your broker, talk to your lawyer, make sure you understand and provide the information in advance. Don't wait.
Yeah. Or even here's what we're thinking. Does this make sense? Like let your broker be part of that process, or even give you a timeline to say, okay, at this point, we're going to pull this lever. And at this point, we pull the next lever and we can't do all of this until this. And like, when should we follow up with you? What month? Let us know when we think. So it's really, it's all working in tandem to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that the timeline makes sense for everybody.
We talk about, your divorce team a lot here. And your insurance broker is just another member of the team. They're not sitting at the negotiation table with you, but they're on the sidelines, making sure that what you're agreeing to is properly, you're protected and everything's going to be, secure.
Exactly.
That's the whole point of your divorce agreement for financial security, long-term security.
Absolutely. And things change, right? So the umbrella amount that you had as a couple could be very different once you're divorced. Maybe one member needs the higher umbrella, the other doesn't anymore. And it just, it's everything is changing. Your insurance, your property and casualty insurance should reflect also. We've had plenty of divorced couples who say, I want a completely different broker than my ex. Great. It's also, it's personal preference, it's education. Someone who didn't deal with the property and casualty in the past, you should not just place the coverages and say, bye, see you next year. That broker should sit down and explain and walk through coverage by coverage. This is the first time you're dealing with this. Let me explain what these coverages actually mean, and what you're paying for here, so that if and when you do have a claim, you actually understand what could or is not covered.
Right. And unlike lawyers, insurance brokers do not charge by the hour.
That is correct.
Have a conversation. It's going to take some time.
Ask as many questions as you want. You got it.
Okay. All right. Well, this is really interesting. And I'm so glad we got to talk about this topic, Michelle, because it really is something that's probably, I know, not on top of mind, but it needs to be. So given everything we've talked about, what would you say your better divorce tip is?
Talk to your broker. Like, there is no two divorce situations that are the same in general and in the property and casualty world. So unless you start having these conversations, there is no button to click. There is no easy, make the switch and let's move on. It is a conversation that really needs to be as everything is evolving. It is not just a one and done. It needs to be held in tandem throughout the entire process of the separation. And the broker should be responsive and helpful and educating both parties along the way as to how this will be the most effective and eliminate any gaps throughout the whole process.
So don't do things on your own.
No.
And don't just do nothing either.
That's correct. Right.
Yeah. The one thing you need to do, just call the broker, make sure you have that conversation. So great tip. Thank you so much. So Michelle, how can people find you? What's the best way to find you?
Sure. So you can email me. You can visit our website. You can call my cell phone. I give my cell phone out to all clients. You can reach me 24/7. As a family business owner, I grew up with my grandpa and my dad taking phone calls weekends and nights, and I never understood why. And now I'm the one getting them. So I fully get it. So we make ourselves very fully accessible and reach out any way that you want. We work with clients all across the country.
What's the website that they should reach out to?
Sure. It's brunswickprivateclient.com.
Okay, great. All right. And to find out more about the Vacca Family Law Group and how we can help you have a better divorce, you can visit our website at vaccalaw.com. This has been another episode of A Better Divorce Podcast, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
You've been tuning in to another episode of A Better Divorce Podcast with Andrea Vacca. Thank you for subscribing, leaving your positive comments and reviews, and sharing the show with others. You can watch episodes at vaccalaw.com, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can listen through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and more. Bye for now, and remember, you can have a better divorce.